दोस्तों ये लाइट एंड साउंड शो जो है वो उसके लिए 4 बजे से वहाँ फेरी से आप लास्ट आ सकते हैं। इसका जो टिकट प्राइस है वो 300 रुपीज़ पर हेड है। और ये रॉस आइलैंड जो भी नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस आइलैंड है वहाँ होता है शाम को। तो दिन में जो है वो नॉर्मल आप रॉस आइलैंड घूम सकते हैं। शाम के लिए सिर्फ 2 बैचेस में वहाँ से फेरी से आपको लाया जाएगा। फेरी का प्राइस 370 रुपये है और लाइट एंड साउंड शो का 300 रुपीज़ पर हेड है। तो थोड़ा डार्क है ये जो लाइट एंड साउंड शो, आप देखेंगे आराम से तो आपको थोड़ा सा पता चलेगा। ऑनलाइन बुकिंग इस शो के लिए आप इस वेबसाइट से कर सकते हैं andamanTourism.gov.in।
मुंह जोड़ के बैठे जजीरे हैं, कहते हैं जमीनों से। हम लहरें बिछाए बैठे हैं बरसों से महीनों से। एक बार तो आओ तैर के तुम, हम साहिल रखते हैं। लहरों की तरह बह जाते हो उतरो तो सफीनों से। वक्त रहता नहीं कहीं टिक कर, इसकी आदत थी आदमी सी है। Time moves in mysterious ways, but it keeps moving, changing course and settling down at will. Where it stops, it leaves behind signs of its visit. Here we unearth the stories, sketched faithfully by time. Where you sit today is one such spot, where time once halted, leaving behind tales of the past. For centuries, this little island on the east of the Andamans was overlooked by the gaze of history. There was no mention of it anywhere. In 672 AD, we first hear of the Andaman Islands in the travel accounts of a Chinese Buddhist monk, but not about Ross Island. In 1016 AD, the islands are mentioned again, this time in the historical documents of Raja Rajendra Chola II. After that, the Andaman Islands keep cropping up here and there in the travel and seafaring accounts of the Portuguese, Dutch, Chinese, French and Danish colonial powers. All accounts suggest that these islands were inhabited by aborigines resembling the Negroid race and were believed to be both unfriendly and fierce in nature. The Nicobar Islands, on the other hand, were populated by aborigines descended from the Mongoloid race. It was the year 1788. Lieutenant Archibald Blair, a hydrographer, and Colonel Colebrook, the Surveyor General of India, working for the British East India Company, carried out an extensive survey of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands for over a year. Lieutenant Blair submitted his first survey report in 1789. It was on the basis of this report that the British decided to colonize these islands. The history of this tiny island, the Ross Island, begins here. Language, it was called Chong Ikibu. But in the 18th century, it took its name from the British marine surveyor Daniel Ross. According to Lieutenant Archibald Blair, a port on the southeast point of the South Andaman Island would be the most secure and accessible. That is the spot we know today as Port Blair. The island on which Lieutenant Blair decided to set up his settlement later came to be known as Chatham Island. A small building was built on Ross Island too, which was used as a local hospital. In 1793, another big change took place. All the inhabitants of the settlement were shifted to the northeast harbour of the Great Andaman. There were around 550 civilians and 270 prisoners in all. The pleasant weather there was considered more suitable for the purposes of a naval arsenal base. This port was named Port Cornwallis. But things did not quite work out as the British had hoped, and fatal diseases continued to dog the settlers. The abnormally high death rates led them to finally close down the settlement. Of just 3 years, Port Cornwallis had become a ghost town. Ross Island watched these events silently from a distance. The hopes of those looking to settle down in the Andamans had receded once again, as if drifting away on the boats, ships and dinghies, leaving the islands behind them. All that remained was a stunned silence and a building frozen in its moment, awaiting with bated breath the return of time once again. 6 long decades passed by, but time did not return. Its footprints were not heard. But far away in the distant mainland of India, there was a great deal happening, and its cries were growing louder. The British East India Company was using every means, fair and foul, to subjugate the rulers and principalities and bring them under their control as British subjects. But there was also a groundswell of patriotic fervour. The British Army, with a largely Indian force of soldiers and sepoys too, came under the spell, responding to the growing discontent. Restlessness was everywhere. One spark, and the simmering movement for freedom would become a blaze And suddenly, on May 11, 1857, that spark did appear. And his name was Mangal Pandey.
How long can we remain silent? How long will we suffer this slavery? We are soldiers. We must oppose this. We must fight. We must stand up for our beliefs.
What are you saying, Mangal?
Yes, we must oppose. We must fight. These new rifles introduced by the English, don't you know? We have to use our teeth to cut open the cartridges, and they are greased with cow fat and pig fat. Cows that are sacred to the Hindus and pigs that our Muslim brothers do not touch. The British have taken away our freedom, our dignity, and now they won't even leave our religions alone. Such open disrespect. How can we let this happen? Let us fight back. If we have any self-respect left in us, and chase this English out of our motherland. Allah!
Suffocation and pain, it was a burning ember, echoed far and wide. It was the voice of the people. When the slogan was for Hindustan, there was neither a leader nor doctrine to be guided by. Even the last ruler of Hindustan, Bahadur Shah Zafar, had been stripped of all his powers and set aside by the British. This first attempt at freedom lost its way, ending in defeat. Towards the end of 1857, the British came down hard, extending their rule to most parts of the country. Countless freedom fighters were deemed traitors and executed. Many others were found guilty and given life sentences. But where were those hordes of revolutionaries to be kept? The first Viceroy of India, Lord Canning, set up a committee.
We shall make a fine example of these convicts. The natives should not dare dream of another mutiny.
But, my lord, the sheer number.
A penal colony, Gulzar. We need to set up a penal colony for these criminals. Far, far away from the mainland, where they cannot possibly infect the other natives with their grand ideas of revolution, where they can carry their passions to their graves.
The Andamans, my lord, would be a perfect place for such a penal colony.
The islands became the dreaded destination for the Indian prisoners, Kalepani, so remote and distant from home that nobody would ever reach them, not even the growing clamor for independence. On 8 December 1857, the islands were surveyed. On 15 January 1858, the report was submitted to the Government of India. On 22nd January, the Union Jack was hoisted, and thus was British rule established on the islands. With 200 freedom fighters as prisoners, Dr. James Patterson Walker, a reputed jailer from Agra, set out for the Andamans on a ship named Semiramis, and on 10th March 1858, they anchored off Chatham Island. 10th of March to this day is remembered as the Andaman Settlement Day. One night,
What is that?
so close that the Aboriginal inhabitants could easily swim across. For reasons of better security, Dr. Walker decided to set up his central office about 2.5 miles away on Ross Island. In the last 60 years, the forest cover on Ross Island had grown. The forests had become so dense that even the sun's rays could not penetrate the undergrowth. The British soldiers set the Indian prisoners to work, and the task of clearing up the dense forests on Ross began. The very hands which had dared to raise their guns against the British and written patriotic oaths to their motherland were now wielding their axes on the trees. The battle for freedom had turned into slavery.
What's the matter? This leg is caught under the branch out. The branch has to be moved or he will die. Come on, brothers. Come on.
To be alive in these conditions was no better than to be dead. Any attempt to escape was dealt with harshly. Prisoners were either killed or handed a death sentence, as was done with convict number 61, Narayan. They seemed to be facing death with no escape.
Who is that? Niranjan Singh, sir. Take it down.
Prisoner number 46, Niranjan Singh, decided to take matters in his own hand and committed suicide.
This is no trick. I could not bear all this. It was too much for him. We are all going to die here. Just like Niranjan. No. I will not. We will not. Let's be brave. After all, we took the oath to fight for our motherland. This too is fight for freedom. Yes, that's right. We must not lose it.
The ones who escaped the bullets and the hangman's noose were claimed by malaria, dysentery or pneumonia. Medicines and treatment facilities were inadequate or absent. Dr. Walker too did not waste any opportunity to inflict the most barbaric treatment on his prisoners. The prisoners were handcuffed in pairs. The ones considered more dangerous had iron fetters on their shackles too, making it impossible to even move. But the passion for freedom once ignited cannot be doused from the hearts and minds of those who desire it. On the night of March 18, 1858, a group of prisoners managed to steal away in a makeshift boat of their own. 11 more followed on March 23rd, and 91 more, a month later, had slipped away via the sea route.
Don't use the torch. We might be seen and also look over the board.
But Dr. Walker managed to recapture most of the escaped prisoners. They were taken to Chatham Island, and on a single day, 86 of them were executed. The regiment, like others, he too had responded to the call of freedom and become a rebel. Arrested and given a life sentence, he was sent to these islands. On fleeing the jail, he found himself caught in the clutches of the Aborigines. Miraculously, he managed to survive in their midst for a year, even learning their language and marrying 2 of their women. One was called Flipa and the other Jigga. In 1859, the Aboriginal tribes came together and decided to mount their own rebellion. On the 16th of May, they camped for the night at a spot which gave them a good view of the convict station at Port Blair. Their targets were the Indian prisoners and the British administration. But late that night, Doodnath Tiwari betrayed the Aborigines by informing the English. The Aborigines of Andamans waged for the liberation of their own land, but their hope for freedom was sacrificed to save the freedom fighters of a more powerful movement, the Indian Freedom Movement. This came to be known as the Battle of Aberdeen. 5 months after this battle, in October 1859, Dr. Walker resigned. Doodnath Tiwari was given a handsome reward and granted pardon, after which he left for his village. Ross Island was to change a lot after Dr. Walker left. The new superintendent, Colonel J.C. Horton and M.V. Portman, treated the Aboriginal tribesmen in more humane ways and even established the Andamanese home for them on Ross. Records and documents stored indicate that the Aborigines continued to be killed by fatal diseases, and several tribes were completely wiped out as a result. Time finally settled down on Ross Island. By now the English had converted it into a charming little township. Water was their first concern. 6 wells were dug for this. A powerhouse was set up, which illuminated the homes and offices of the English. The Chief Commissioner of the Andamans, with his subordinates and a few Indian officers too, settled down here. An officers' club was built, with a swimming pool and facilities for other games. And the spot you are sitting on at the moment used to be a tennis court in those days. The bakery close to the officers' club was famous for its bread and cake. This building in front of you was the bakery. It was one of the best specimens of 19th century colonial British architecture. It was during the time of Superintendent Colonel Horton that the foundations for educational facilities began at Ross Island. Well versed in Persian, he had written a book on astronomy. His search for a scholar to edit ended with the freedom fighter Maulana Fazl-e-Haq Khairabadi. And this is how Ross Island had its first school. Its first teacher was Maulana Fazl-e-Haq Khairabadi, and the first student was none other than Colonel Horton. This beginning soon led to 3 more schools and an education which included English as well. A well-stocked library, a printing press, and a secretariat were also constructed. Where there is a settlement, there will be commerce too. Farzand Ali's settlement store was the first among a chain of shops and establishments. It is said that Farzand Ali came with his wife from India.
Ali Papa, some rice for 2 annas and dal for 1 anna, please.
Yes, madam. Namaste, Banaji. Namaskar, namaskar. How are you feeling? Good. What was the commotion in your shop yesterday? The sailors from the ship Arab and the soldiers got into a fight. Oh, I tried to stop them, but got hurt myself. So now the order to close all the shops on Sundays will be seriously considered.
Batu had a fairly large shop. Apal Swami and Sons were army contractors. And Nabi Baksh had a tailor shop. But for children, the most attractive shop was the one run by a lady, Roop Kavar, which sold sweets like coconut barfis, laddu and fried chana.
Careful, careful. What?
Don't step on each other. One after the other, please. Okay?
Okay.
Here.
But Chachi, I don't have any money.
It's okay, beta. Get it tomorrow. Okay?
Me first. No, you want me.
Where there is civilization, religion will soon follow. Towards the end of the 19th century in 1863, Mrs. Harriet Tytler, wife of the Superintendent R.C. Tytler, laid the foundations for a church. Soon there were two churches, the Church of England and the Catholic Church. The Christ Church bell is said to have sounded exactly like the Big Ben in London. This was a pleasant reminder of home for the settlers. Saturday nights, however, were a time for celebration and gaiety. One of the most important people on the island was Gowrie, the in charge of the island's powerhouse.
In just a moment, sir.
There was another tradition on the island. Every afternoon, 12 shots of cannon were fired at exactly 12 noon. Its boom echoed all over the islands. There was a post office, and it had a telephone installed in it. Every week when the post arrived, it was the duty of the postmaster to inform the individual officers about their mail.
It will start now. Hello, Swami speaking. The mail has just arrived, sir. Please give me some time to sort them. Hello, Swami here.
Hey, Swami. Officer still here? Has my mail arrived?
I am sorry, sir. There is no mail for you today.
Why, Swami? Why?
I have absolutely no idea, sir. Sorry, sir.
Oh, come on.
Why, Swami? Why? Why ask me? Ask your wife in London, no? Huh?
Hello.
Good afternoon, William, sir. Swami speaking. I am glad to inform you there are 2 letters for you today.
Oh, Charlie, you made my day, Swami.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Swami, tell me, do you ever get any mail?
No, sir. I suppose that will happen only when I post a letter addressed to myself someday.
In 1872, the Viceroy of India, Lord Mayo, visited the Andamans on an official tour. He was welcomed with a ceremonial 21 cannon salute. The boom of the cannons was also heard by a Pathan prisoner, Sher Ali Khan. He had once served in the mounted police regiment in the northwestern frontier. He was a soldier. He instantly recognized the meaning of the 21-gun salute. Clearly, the Viceroy was being welcomed. When Lord Mayo reached Mount Harriet to witness the sunset, Sher Ali found his opportunity and lay in waiting. After the sunset, as Lord Mayo was boarding the ship, he was distracted by a movement behind him and stopped for a while. This was just the moment Sher Ali was looking for. With the lightning speed of a tiger, he leapt upon Lord Mayo and drove his dagger into his back. Sher Ali stabbed him twice, and Lord Mayo died soon after. The security guards captured him in an instant. When he was asked why he had killed Lord Mayo, he replied, "It was an order from my rulers who were making Ross Island, Paris of the East, was simultaneously designing these wretched cells for the Indian freedom fighters too. But perhaps theirs." The construction of the cellular jail began in 1893 and was completed in 1906. The movement for freedom left the 19th century and moved into the 20th century, and an idol of Ganesh was placed. Joined in. And then a mosque was built. By the early years of the 20th century, England's grip over its empire in India was perceptibly beginning to slacken. Although their pride as rulers remained intact, they began to adopt an alternative strategy for governing India, which was fast becoming a resource base in their own war effort. World War II broke out in the battleground. Japan was conquering Burma, Singapore, Malaysia and other such countries. The Andaman Islands were not too far away. Showing great foresight, the British gradually began evacuating their staff and families from the Andamans. On 26 June 1941 at 5:21 p.m. Magnitude ripped through Ross Island and practically split the island into two. A large crack was formed right across the center. History took a decisive turn once again for Ross Island. After the British had left Andamans, only a few Anglo-Indian officers, Indian prisoners in the cellular jail, and their descendants remained. Japan's Imperial Army launched a swift attack on the Andamans, turning the British out and taking over the entire area. The Japanese had captured the police barracks on Ross, but as they approached the telegraph office, the telegraph master, also an Anglo-Indian, blew it up with explosives previously placed there. The British Chief Commissioner C.F. Waterford surrendered soon after. The Japanese captured the remaining British officers and imprisoned them, while freeing all those who were imprisoned in the cellular jail. On the one hand, the Quit India movement in the mainland was growing more intense, with cries for freedom, Inqilab Zindabad, becoming stronger. On the other side, Subhash Chandra Bose was joining hands with the Japanese, getting ready to liberate India with their help. The soldiers of Indian National Army, or Azad Hind Fauj, began to gather in the Andaman Islands. On 29 December 1943, Netaji reached Ross Island and stayed at the former government house. He toured the area, reviving hopes. This was also the first time when the Indian tricolour was hoisted. But the The Japanese were playing a double-edged game. On the one hand, they assured Netaji of their support, and on the other, treated the Indians on the island in openly barbaric ways. The conditions of the prisoners had gone from bad to worse. As the war intensified, the Allied forces began aerial attacks against Japan, blocking their path and making retreat difficult too. And then dawned the catastrophic day, which will always be remembered as the worst of days for all humanity. On the 6th of August 1945, the Allied forces dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima and repeated the heinous deed on 9th August on Nagasaki. A stunned silence now engulfed the world. The war was over. Brigadier J. Solomon captured the remaining Japanese soldiers and detained them on Ross Island as prisoners of war. October 1945, the 87-year-old penal settlement was finally abolished. August 15, 1947 was not too far away.
Greatest headlines of the century. The India's battle for independence from the British Empire had been a pressing problem since the early years of the 20th century. Mohandas Gandhi, spiritual leader of middle Indians, and which
to the mission of I am free to write that we have already realized that the responsibility of winning freedom does not rest merely on the shoulders of our countrymen at home. हमने अपने परिवार को मुल्क के ऊपर रखा, ना हमने अपने शहर को, प्रदेश को, भाषा को, सभ्यता को, किसी चीज को हमने अपने देश के ऊपर रखा.
Other features of this yatra are always at our disposal, but whether we shall resort to use this weapon immediately or what other steps we shall take, I cannot judge at this. But you are hopeful. A moment comes which comes but rarely in history when we step out to the
तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे.
दिखाई देते हैं धुंध में अब भी साए कोई, मगर बुलाने से वक्त लौटे न आए कोई. Today the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are part of the Republic of India, but a deep-seated sadness now seems to have become a permanent feature of Ross Island. Time has moved away, abandoning it to its own destiny. The silence of its retreating form echoes to this day. India got her freedom in 1947. For 2 decades after that, Ross Island was neglected. Then in 1967, it was handed over to the Indian Navy, but the silence continued. Another decade slipped by. The official papers were signed on 18th April 1979, but it still remains at the fringes, trapped in its silence. The silence has lingered. जज़ीरे हैं, कहते हैं ज़मीनों से, हम लहरें बिछाए बैठे हैं बरसों से महीनों से. एक बार तो आओ तैर के तुम, हम साहिल रखते हैं, लहरों की तरह बह जाते हो, उतरो तो सफीनों से। हर रोज उठाते हैं किरणें और रंग बिखराते हैं सातों रंग मुट्ठी में मगर बस 3 लहराते हैं। सत्यमेव जयते, सत्यमेव जयते।
है सातों रंग मुट्ठी में मगर 3 ही लहराते हैं, 3 ही लहराते हैं, 3 ही लहराते हैं।
ये कहाँ, यहाँ पे तो शिप ही नहीं है, कहाँ गई शिप? अरे नहीं, मेरी शिप नहीं गई।